What deep, dark secret did you learn about the seemingly perfect family? The mum remarried when her kids were quite young to a new, perfect stepdad. Roll on 10 years and the 15-year-old daughter notices something in the bathroom while she's showering. Webcam, via the stepdad. That's not the darkest part though. The darkest part, in my humble opinion, is that her mum forgave him for filming her 15-year-old daughter in the bath and on the toilet, told the daughter she would always put her husband first, and arranged for her daughter to go and live with her nan. I grew up with a girl down the street who lived with her mom and stepdad. Stepdad was pretty cool, according to 7-year-old me. Nice guy. Come to find out, he'd been raping my friend for years. It had been going on so long, had been so normalized to her, that she thought I was doing that with my dad, and our other friend was doing it with her dad. To her, your father figure having sex with you was just something you did. I was too young to know what happened at the time it was discovered, but I do remember my mom asking me if he had ever touched me, and her being very concerned he might have hurt me. Was years before I found out what actually happened. When I was a kid I knew a set of twins who were friends with my older sister. The twins, both female, were straight A students and always dressed modestly. Neither girl was allowed to date and their parents owned a huge house with multiple cars and the girls never seemed to want for anything. Anyway, a few years later the parents were busted because apparently they owned another house a few streets away, less lavish, and they were running a brothel out of it with girls the same age as their daughters, who were around 18 at this time and both in university. I just found it very ironic that they were so protective over their own daughters but were whoring out other people's daughters. Know a brother and sister, live together in a huge mansion and both own amazing beautiful cars, clearly very affluent. One of them began dating a family friend who wasn't so well off. Turns out the reason they're so rich is because their parents were associated with some Italian mafia, and were brutally murdered and raped in front of them when they were children. They were given a huge inheritance after this event. You would never guess, they look like they've had the easiest life. Edit, since everyone's asking. The mother was raped, then murdered while her husband watched, then the husband was murdered. Poor choice of syntax, my bad. Well, it is better to cry in a brand new Mercedes than on a shirty old bike. I worked at an Amazon store. The owner of the place hired this kid whose parents went to his church. The day he was supposed to start, the whole family shows up. Mom, dad, son. They all start working. The guy was too spineless to let them go, so they all got hired. They were pretty much bottom of the barrel workers, and just kind of kept themselves aside from pleasantries. We were kind of a rowdy bunch and they didn't fit in, and also 3 of them did the work of 1 person. My co-worker started referring to them as the Dahmer family, because the father resembled Jeffrey Dahmer and they were all a little bit too idyllic and Christian. Then it started to get weird. The son regularly called out, citing stomach issues and saying certain tasks made his legs tired and things like that. Mr. Dahmer started having these intense fits of rage where he would go off on us for minor things. Ms. Dahmer started to become strangely attached to me and regularly bought me strange gifts like holistic headache creams, a neti pot, organic tea, etc. Years later, I find out that the son had AIDS. The mother and the son were a little too close for that age. The father eventually got caught doing some strange things and they got a divorce. Miss Dahmer, on my last week working there, started asking me about demons and things. On my last day, she gave me this manila envelope that had this 30-page manifesto she written as a letter to me about how she was infested with demons and all kinds of crazy Song of Solomon type things. She thought I was infested with demons too. But hey, I still have that neti pot. My next door neighbors, husband, wife, and 2 young girls, and my neighbors down the road, husband, wife, and 3 young girls, were the best of friends and did everything together. They went on vacations together, they went out to dinner together, they even bought a timeshare together. My family had to move to a different state for 2 years and this was during the housing crash of 2008, so our house never sold so we just moved right back in. Well, when we were cleaning up our house to move back in, we found a Kama Sutra style book in a bathroom drawer and a mysterious bleach stain on some carpet. We had told all the neighbors where the extra key was in case they wanted to store stuff temporarily or take cover during a hurricane. We live in Florida, or whatever, since there wasn't anything of ours there to steal. We just assumed some teenager couldn't find anything better to jack off to and tried to clean up his mess. After a few months of being moved back in, our next door neighbors move out in the middle of the night. They left in such a hurry they left their cat. We come to learn that the husband of our next door neighbors and the wife of the other neighbors were having an affair and using our house as a rendezvous and used baby monitor MS to keep an eye on the kids. When we moved back in they had to start taking business trips and they eventually got caught. The wife on the next door neighbors was willing to work things out, but didn't want to be in the same neighborhood as that whore. That was convenient as the husband down the street was basically a hillbilly Jason Momoa and was threatening to kill them. In the end we got a cat which was neat. He died a few years ago but was a great cat. My grandfather lives in Tennessee by himself, kind of out in the mountains. Well, there is a family cemetery in his backyard up this 50-yard long hill that's covered in thick trees. There's a dude in our family buried up there, along with his 9 dead children and 4 dead wives who all died at pretty young ages. All of the women he married died around 3 to 5 years after they got married. This was back in the mid to late 1800s, and I guess the guy was known to be real shady. Still unknown if he played a part in all the deaths or if he is just a super unlucky man. I met my friend's grandparents and they are your typical kind white doily-toting American grandparents. They literally have the cutest old people house in the world and they're extremely friendly. Turns out for a time in the 60s or 70s they were in a ex-cult. It's an open secret that my friend's uncle is actually the child of the grown mother and the cult leader. There are the ones about my family I've told before. We aren't perfect, but things like attempted axe murdering grandfather are pretty crazy secrets. But as a kid, I hung out with a dude who was part of a perfect family it seemed. His mom was an Olympic rower and his dad was some super cool business exec. We were good friends from like 12 to 14 or so, then different school. I found out his mom died of cancer like the year later, was very sad. Then the next year, it came to light the dad was sexually abusing him and his 2 little sisters, and had been maybe forever. He went to jail for that. It was one of those floor falling out of the world things. Poor guy. It wasn't a seemingly perfect family, but I did find out when I got older that, first, my great-great-grandmother was murdered and they never found her killer. Second, I had to always wear long shirts and long pants around a particular uncle, and only found out why when I was 13 and he propositioned me to have a threesome with my mother, then found out that he'd spent 7.5 years in jail for aggravated assault. No one in my family talks about it. Third, my uncle's uncle molested him when he was 8 and was surprised by what little boys could do. Puke. Both those men still attend every single big family gathering and I don't know if no one knows or we just keep tucked up secrets, but I don't go to family gatherings anymore. Edit. The uncle from number 2 is not either uncle from number 3. Uncle 2 was technically my mother's uncle, but always said we were to just refer to him as uncle. The reason it's kept secret is because my nan doesn't want to judge by her family for me outing a disgusting family secret that she was told to keep quiet about by those involved. So that's why I don't go anymore, because I don't have time to keep secrets for incestuous child molesters. I hate that families think it's acceptable to have kids around these kinds of people and then have them cover up like they are the ones who are supposed to be ashamed. In my stepfather's family, his sister's son raped a 5-year-old girl in a church during service. Got sent away until he was 18. He started showing up to family events, and my mom gets all but hurt that I won't come around with my 2-year-old son. I have a very small family of about 7 people. Growing up everyone would get together for events, and everything seemed pretty normal and everyone seemed to get along. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I noticed that everyone in my family actually hates the shirt out of each other, and it was just some huge contest to see who had become the better person over the years. My mother and my grandmother are the only ones who talk to each other, and it's probably only because they live together. My grandmother and grandfather are separated, and my grandmother only calls him every few months to see if he's dead or not. They kept their handicapped son locked up. Oh, most people didn't even know he existed. They made his room like a padded cell and just left him in bed all the time with a nurse coming to bathe, feed and rotate him. His parents didn't even talk to him or look at him often. People dealt with things badly in the past. I had a close friend at school whose brother had Downs, but we didn't know because he was sent to a home early in life and never saw him. It all came out one day when one of us dropped by at the time of his annual home visit. She had been forbidden to mention her brother even in front of her parents. My grandpa on my mom's side had another family on the side. When he died, my grandmother's name was put on his gravestone. The other family chiseled it out. Also, my oldest aunt on my mom's side isn't blood related. Didn't learn that until I was 23. How is it determined who is the main family and who is the side family? Does it just boil down to who was there first? Does it matter if one family knows about the other but not the reverse? I have so many questions. Of course our side of the family says we were the main family. But that's because he was married to my grandma first. Not sure how the other family found out. My grandma found out after rumors started spreading and she confronted him. The other family was from another town. This was in the 60s and grandma was an immigrant housewife, so she didn't have too many options but stay with him, so it's not spoke too much of. Grandpa died when my grandma was pregnant with my mom. I have a very similar story. My grandpa had a couple side families, and in the end totaled 22 kids. He died when he was 35. Old grandpappy could slang some donk apparently. 22 kids by age 35? That's ducking insane. And some insane ducking.